Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Game Dev Local podcast. We are your hosts, Stuart, Ville and Jay Uppal, and we're going to be doing um, kind of a more general episode than normal. We're going to talk a bit about 2024, kind of do a bit of a 2024 wrapped.
Mm,
Just talk about the things that we found cool and interesting, and maybe touch on some things that might be cool and important for indies in 2025.
yep,
What would you like to start
sounds
with,
good.
Jay?
What do we want to start with? I think the elephant in the room, isn't that usually the one we go for first? Breaking it down. So, layoffs.
Layoffs. Okay, yeah. Oh. I mean, it feels like well, it's been what, like 3 years now of mass layoffs, right? It's not.
I mean,
I don't
I
think
think it's
anyone's.
2023 really, 2023 and 2024. Like, 22 we were still in that COVID bump bounce thing. It was really end of it that was like starting to appear.
I guess, yeah, it wasn't really dominating um
Yeah, I think we had a bit of a calm
this.
before the storm, at least from the events and people I was meeting as well. Everyone's kind of just like, oh, we get to go out and have a life again. And it was just like, we'll think about the issues next year. That was basically 2022.
Yeah, yeah. And it's been across the board. It's not even just been like studios. It's been things like, I don't know if you heard that like Twitch reduced its workforce by, I think it was like 500 employees or something. Um,
Yeah,
Discord Discord laid off like 17% of its staff.
yeah. I think
Riot
with
was
the games,
11%.
I think with the games industry, we sometimes get into this echo chamber where it's like obviously industry layoffs suck and everything, but
Yeah,
like there is definitely this echo chamber of like games is so bad, like we're the only ones hit, but no, it's like a wider thing. All of tech in general has been hit hard, even though AI makes it seem like it's not. Like there's been
yeah,
lots of layoffs across the board in different industries. So it's not just a games thing. I think games is feeling it the most because the industry is just only consistently grown. And this is sort of the first blip in it, in my mind, becoming a mainstream industry where it's like, we're not invincible, which is what the MO's been up till this point.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I think that's the thing. Like, it's just grown to a point, and you're having this correction for the first time, which is why it's a big shock to a lot of people. But it's not unusual considering the state of the economy, the state of what games has become in terms of a mainstream media. Like film, like animation, a lot of these have also faced similar things. You had like strikes, everything else. Like this year's been kind of a dead year for film as well.
Yeah.
Games, so it's not like we're alone in this, even though it sometimes feels like that's what the echo chamber says.
Yeah, I think you even see it when I mean I always feel like I've completed Netflix a number of times and the algorithm has to like scatter to go, there's this whole other stuff you haven't seen because like the content just can't hit quick enough. Um and yeah, I think before, like you say, this year, like that, what have the big hits even been? There's not been. Normally, you have like a year or two where you're like, oh my God, there were so many good movies, there was so much good TV. And I think we probably have had some standout stuff,
Mhm.
but the volume hasn't been there for sure.
No, I mean right now it's just pretty much Arcane, right? That's the big one.
Yeah,
But
I think we're almost lucky that Arcane is has this like ability for people to. I mean, people make memes and things of stuff anyway, but there's like so many content creators that can jump on something like Arcane. There's so much cosplay that could be done. There's so much like, what if I made this from Arcane? Um, yeah, it's just like there's a wealth of content to be rehashed.
yeah.
So it gives it this longer tale of life, so we can all live in this little Arcane bubble while we wait for like the next big thing.
Yeah, I mean you had Fallout early in the year as well. That was also a pretty good show.
Oh, I totally forgot about Fallout. Damn. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean it's different service site, right? You got to go for Amazon to see that. But yeah,
Yeah.
that was a good one as well. But no, I think by and large, like I guess taking it back to wrapping on the top of the layoffs, yeah, we got what 30,000 roughly now in this year.
Yeah, I think the last stats I saw was yeah 33,000 something like that. It's probably gone up since then.
Damn.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think I don't know. I would like to think that the worst of it is overish. Like I don't think you're gonna get as much in terms of magnitude of mass layoffs. I don't think we're going to go into a stable games industry anytime soon either. But like I think the we're at either the worst, we're already kind of at that rock bottom space. So I think it's upward trajectory from here, and like the games industry did grow in terms of money across PC, mobile. So at
Mm.
least on those fronts, it feels like a lot of the worst case scenarios didn't completely transpire. So I do
Yeah,
feel like,
also I don't know if like I don't know if a stable games industry is something that could ever exist. Like games is such a it's such a dynamic medium, and there's so many ways to get it wrong before you can get it right. Um, and in so many cases, like along the gauntlet, you just there's so many points of at which you need luck to have like
mm-hmm,
played a part.
absolutely.
You need to even like at the final point of release, like you kind of need to hit the zeitgeist. Like the audience needs to be there and ready for it.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. It's definitely hard to measure like how to build success. Like I think that's for any industry that's tough, but especially for media and for games, where you have such a like a parasocial relationship between like the consumers and the developers, it's even harder. I think it's more even within that you kind of have some realm of job security usually, which currently doesn't exist. And I think we're probably gonna
Yeah,
slightly head back in that direction over time, depending on if you're still in the games industry and have survived. I think that's the biggest risk is that there'll be a lot of outflow from the talent base and the talent pool that's currently in the games industry. Because, I mean, as fun as games are to make, it is probably like the worst decision you can make if you care about money in your career to go
yeah,
build games.
yeah.
So, yeah, I think we're definitely going to see a bit of an exodus from the industry. And and obviously there'll also be a lot of new studios. I think those for me what I'm excited about from the fallout of this year is kind of all the new studios, the new sort of development things that people are going to actually be trying more things. So at least in the indie space, I mean, like the industry is already very saturated,
Hmm.
but we've come to a point where we're kind of at a breaking point in terms of the development costs, in terms of also the transition in technology, which we can get into. But I think you're gonna have a lot of in the next like 3 to 5 years. There's gonna be a lot of like new studios coming in. There's gonna be a lot of new
Hmm.
players coming in. I think that's gonna be sort of a big trend towards the future from what we've had here, because a lot of people are not gonna leave the industry. They're
Yeah,
doing their own thing. We're seeing a lot of like mini consultancies pop up. Case in point, and
yeah,
then also a lot of studios come up. You had things like Spectre Divide, which was I think like X Riot and all these guys. So you've got a lot of talented people out there that are building kind of new things for themselves. So I'm excited, at least from that perspective, in terms of the types of games and things that we're going to see in the upcoming future.
hmm.
And I think that's where like indie has sort of the biggest room, really.
I think also we're going to see like a slightly different way of how indie studios have worked or will work. Um, because it used to be like the kind of format that everyone was operating under was you start with this small team, you build a little thing, you get some money or funding behind you, you increase the team size a bit, your studio grows, you release this game, maybe you make enough money to like feed the mouths for a couple of months after release. You need to look at new ways to do stuff. You start chasing funding again. You get some money in. You grow your team to make the bigger game for the next thing,
Mm,
and then like at some point you end up like you're either deemed as like double A or just like a big indie.
yeah,
Um, and I think people's goal was always like, well, I want to be one of the big players. And I don't think we see that anymore. I think that people have seen like a lot, especially in that like double A region, we saw a lot of deaths along that, especially after COVID.
we
And I think
did.
that, I think that now there's going to be a lot more collaboration. I think there's going to be a lot more studios doing co-dev,
Mm.
accessing outsourcing,
Work for hire, yeah.
um, making sure that they stay small and agile at the core of the studio, and just yeah, hiring in services as and when they need.
I think partially yes. I mean, I will caveat the double A point by saying 2023 was the double A year. Like
Yeah,
that was the big thing this year was double A is back and double A is going strong. You got your Helldivers, Palworld, all of that. Like all the top games are basically indie slash double A, or indie that
yeah.
transitioned into double A this year, I guess. But yeah, I think that was the big trend out this year, and I think you're going to continue to see that. Like next year is going to be a bloodbath because of GTA. That's just how it is. Like AAA is coming back strong next year, guys. Don't be expecting too many revenues towards the end of the year. Whenever they actually drop it, I think it was announced that like a lot of other studios are basically like, we're gonna wait until they announce when GTA is coming, and then we're gonna stay the hell away from that side of the calendar. That's like the MO right now.
Yeah, yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah, I think indies will still sort of trudge along, and you'll get that to, like you said, where you'll have smaller, kind of more agile teams. I think part of that's also like the enablement that like AI gives us a technology in terms of allowing you to be efficient to do a lot
Hmm.
of these things. Like, you can get things like marketing assets and UA done really well with that now, especially on the mobile side, but even on the PC console to make like ads and all of that, because that's still a big thing on the content side. And then within just development, not saying we're going to do Gen I in games completely, I think that's definitely a big trend that will continue. And all the big players are investing money into that. I don't think there's as many small people that can afford that kind of service.
Hmm.
But I do think that a lot of people can use AI based tools to like expedite their development process. Like you need less people to do more work, right? Whether it's like creating copy, whether it's like looking up information, looking up how to do things, debug things, QA, whatever. There's just so many different facets that I think AI just helps enable that you can cut out a good like roughly one person on average per team and just replace it with AI to basically
Yeah.
expedite the process. So the leaner teams working more agile, working smarter with these tools, I definitely see that happening. And I mean, that's just going to be on the flip side, the bad thing of you're going to get even more saturated games because now instead of having one team of 30, 40 people, you've got five teams of like 8 to 10 people or something. So five more games instead of that one. I think that's the thing.
So
Games is
you
becoming
and I have
easier.
like discussed this AI thing quite a lot recently, and you said that you've noticed that like there isn't as big a pickup of AI tools in the UK as there is abroad. Do you think that that might
Yeah.
change?
Uh, Maybe. I think this just goes to, I guess, more broad, like the international scope of just how people work. I
Mm.
think in Europe, in UK, we are a little bit slow to adopt, right? Like because of things like how we work, the whole, work-life balance thing, which is great, not denying that, but like at the same time, they don't have that in like the US or in China or half these places in the world. And
Hmm.
there, the work culture is a lot more, especially now with Trump deregulating a lot of things, whereas we're on the flip side here
Right.
where we're regulating more things.
Yeah.
It's very hard to make a case for, the Europe is going to be the big market. Like even when we're building games here, your success comes across if it's either in somewhere like a Japan, Korea, like a big paying market, or like a US, right? Like most games here, like your studio survives and grows based on those international markets. And I just see them being in a position because of less regulation, because of the way they work, to adopt these technologies. And just from the mentality of people I've spoken to, they're generally more bullish in terms of
Hmm.
trying new things. Whereas here, and this goes to state of general startups, general like innovations, from what I see as well, across kind of the board, right? Like this is also talking to mobile, which I've seen like this year, the biggest players are literally, I think if you look at the mobile games chart, the top like 15 games are basically all China plus like Supercell, which is basically owned by
Yeah.
Tencent. So all China and
Yeah.
Asia, basically China, Korea,
Yeah.
Japan, like East Asia. Like that's it, right? That's what's dominating. Even if you were at Gamescom, you would have seen pretty much half of like all the consumer side was like Korea, China, like Eastern devs. And even in the business side, half of the stalls was like every like region of China had their own stand, Whereas like on the west side, there was much smaller proportion. All the stalls were smaller for like the Western devs. Even on the business side, when you're looking at things like Microsoft and all these, like it just felt like very bare compared to
Right.
past things. So when I'm just looking at that in like a broader scale, I'm like one from the regulation side, one from the innovation side in terms of just how much money flows into this stuff. You have a lot more, I guess, tech forward thinking people or opportunities in places like the US or other places where, I mean, East Asia, they want to build a better life, so they're going to try and make the most of whatever they can, and they can build a global product now. In America and stuff, they're always bullish. It's like the American dream is, let's build and all that crap. So
Yeah.
I definitely see them adopting it faster. And from a money perspective, for big companies, and I think you're seeing this especially in Europe, which is all the big studios, like the biggest layoffs are in Europe. You're paying your average, like, because of the protection that people have here, right? Like if Sony hires you here versus Sony hires you in America, there is very different terms in what they pay. Like they might pay
Yeah.
double the salary in the US, but with taxes being what they are here, everything else, and especially the employee protection in terms of you need at least 1 month notice, 2 months notice, whatever is in your contract, you have to pay for extra
Hmm.
security, for insurance, for like so many other things on top. You're basically either at parity in terms of the overall money that's going out into an employee here versus an employee in like the US a lot of times,
Right.
even though their salaries seem more inflated. And what that ends up meaning is their work culture is a bit more toxic, I guess, but the employee there is going to work you 60, 70 hours a week. The employee here by mandate is going to work 38 to 40 hours, and a lot of times generally has, I guess, slower uptake in terms of being in an environment that is more bullish on trying new things or picking up a lot of these technologies. Not
Yeah.
to say it doesn't exist completely, but that's like by and large like the broad picture that I see. And then you're seeing things like because of the regulation being what it is here, you had DMA come out this year, which is slightly separate on more privacy side. But then even like Apple announcing they're not going to roll out the AI features here because they don't know how regulation is going to do, and it's partially I think a marketing ploy to be like anti EU. But that still is there where I'm like, one is people are just there's not money here to engage those services,
Hmm.
so like this is not a focal market. I think like Microsoft even said they might be pulling out like Xbox marketing in Europe because it's just not a focal point as much. So it's things like that, right? Like these are big moves where they're just like devaluing a lot of this part of the world where it's like you have things like the war, you have a lot of instability with what's happening, high cost of labor for, in a lot of people's eye, talent that doesn't reach sort of the best potential.
Right.
So at that point, it's like, where do you scale back the team the most? Europe feels like a very easy thing to do, especially if you can outsource to other places and cover most of your costs in Asia, for instance, and they can do most of the work. And then you have a couple of people here as like a skeleton crew to man most of what's happening. And then all your development's happening in a place like the US or somewhere where you can get away with it without, the regulation getting in the way. So it just makes it a very hard case for, and this is I think for bigger companies, less so for indies, because they're still gonna continue chugging along. Like smaller people
Yeah.
that are building will still build. It's just opportunities for funding, opportunities for money, for resources, for technology and what's happening on the cutting edge. If that's what you want to understand, use, and enable, that's just less because that's kind of always been the case here. We're in a bust cycle right now, so it's even stricter on funds. It's even stricter in terms of like how you're gonna take big swings. Like
Yeah.
we're kind of huddled down. I think all of the world's kind of huddled down a little bit into like we want to go back to safety space because we're in uncertain times. But safety spaces for us versus safety spaces for the US or Asia mean very different things in terms of what that means on R&D, innovation, all of that stuff, and how quickly you try and move.
Yeah. I think I've over my years in the creative industry in general, we the UK is always slower. Like we kind of dine off of the fact that um the rest of the world where they like where we export our content, we dine out on this fact they're like, oh, we're the quirky British and oh, the quirky British have made another quirky British thing, and like that works for some of us,
Yeah.
but like if you want to make something cool, you do need to hustle. Like you do need to take risks. You need to like make bold moves, and British people just generally like even our hustle culture isn't like as strong as it is in other places.
Well, it's still better than most of mainland Europe or Western Europe. I'll
You
give
think?
that much. Oh, definitely, definitely. I think
But do you not think that's because like we move in like the entrepreneurial spaces, so we see the hustlers regularly. I don't think across the
I mean,
UK.
because I've lived in like Amsterdam, I've lived in Berlin, I've been in startups pretty much my whole career,
Yeah.
both tech and games. Like hustle culture here, I think this is the thing where, especially post Brexit, one of the things is you do have slightly diverging regulation between UK and Europe.
Hmm. Yeah.
And UK is basically like mini US in Europe. That's how the world perceives us. We're
Right.
like US is talking hand for Europe. Like that's
Yeah.
why it was the
Yeah.
Brits, basically. That's what we've become, unfortunately. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And you see that with places like London, right? London is not a typical European city per se. And you see that with the money that flows through. And I think that's kind of the staying power, even despite things like Brexit, even though a lot of that business now has moved to Amsterdam, there is still a good enough base here. And UK is amongst the richest European countries. So when we're looking at even for games purchasing things, like we're still in like the top, I think 5 to 10 markets in the world in terms of paying users. So from that perspective, it is still more hustly than most of like Western mainland or general Europe, but less so compared to the rest of the world because we're kind of in the middle of like we have some of that American influence and we have some of that European influence, and we're
Mm.
in that middle spot, which life wise I think is actually pretty good long term if it can be
Yeah.
sustained, and like that'll evolve into a bunch of other conversations. But yeah, we're I think what's changed is it's not a global superpower as it was back in the day, which
Yeah.
I think inspired a lot of the Brexit and all of this. I think it was a lot of the empire talk. Um, and I think it's just the reality of understanding like UK's place in the world in the global markets and how it can be sort of leveraged. I think there
Yeah.
is a lot of good, like, you have the best universities in the world here with Oxbridge, with Imperial, with a lot of things. So you have a lot of talented people, and it's still a very big attraction for a lot of people to come to. I think the problem becomes growing and scaling that talent. That's the
Yeah.
biggest issue that I see in the games industry, but in general, in a lot of different industries around UK and Europe, more broadly speaking, where that talent, the growth isn't necessarily the same as what you would get for a comparative person in, say, like the US or somewhere else, just because it's come to this point where I think of having, instead of having work-life balance, and this is less games industry, this is more outside of it and what I'm seeing in the UK, it's more like you have kind of work is a facilitation for the rest of your life, but a lot of people don't actually care about their work. Like you
Yeah.
do have some of that mentality in like bigger studios as well, where it's just like, and I've seen this with companies that I used to work in, have gone back to, where it's just like, it's just my day job. I'm just going there to make money so that I can live. I don't actually care about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that a lot of other places in the world have a bit more, is the purpose side of like, you're spending 8+ hours a day working. Like it should be something that you value, or that you can kind of, you have a plan around that. And I think from both management perspective, and this is a general problem with management perspectives to growing, especially within this industry, there isn't as much of like a defined necessarily career path or structure towards growing that talent and giving them opportunities a lot of times. I think that is for me the biggest thing in terms of being able to be open to the idea of growth and allowing change, is when you get to that transitionary point in your career, when you start becoming management and more senior, a lot of times people also just end up getting a little bit lazy.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm like, okay, it's going to be hard to adopt AI and all this stuff if the general mentality of everyone around you is like, it's whatever, I'll do it in 5 years when it's good.
And also like the the UK school system, at least like where I'm teaching, and I've heard similar stories actually from my friends who, like a lot of my friends are teachers, and teachers in games specifically.
Mm,
But we're kind of seeing in the education system a lot of like well, one, like complete just block off from AI tools. Like if you try and access anything that is deemed to be an AI website, then it's blocked for students. Even things like I tried to access Notion the other day, and it was deemed an AI.
Really?
Yeah, and I was like,
Wow.
it has AI tools. It's not an AI tool. Like it has AI in it, but it's not. I mean, they
Yeah.
probably are moving towards being a lot more of like an AI tool, but still,
I
um,
mean, everything's
just
moving to becoming an AI-enabled tool.
and the thing is, like you absolutely can't like just close your eyes and hope that students like I get why they're doing it. They don't want students to learn like this whole cheat culture and have like AI do the thinking for them. But I can literally teach them how to use AI
Yeah.
properly so that it helps you think, as opposed to like even on a simple basis, like one thing that I remember struggling with as a student, and I remember most of my friends struggling with, was that blank page in front of you, and just being like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I think I know what I need to say and do and write and stuff, and I just can't." Like just this foreboding blankness,
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah,
like,
yeah. You're just like, I
and
don't know
and
where to start.
it's almost like partially, if you're especially if you're smart, you kind of have like choice paralysis. Like you
Mm.
could go in any direction. Like where do you start? And AI tools, like ChatGPT, can really help you with that stuff.
Oh,
You can
100%.
just go, I need to write a thing for this. What would be a good idea for an outline?
I
It will
mean,
give you an outline, and then you immediately know. You'll read it, and you'll be like, yeah, no, no, yeah, and you're off.
that's my thing, right? Like in the past, if we're talking things like software dev, right? Even in uni, whatever, Stack Overflow is your best friend. Like every teacher will tell you Stack Overflow is your best friend. Now, an
Yeah.
AI trained on Stack Overflow that's going to give you the exact same result that would take you an hour to search for Stack Overflow, it's not your friend. You don't use
Yeah.
that. I'm like, how
Yeah.
does that make sense? It's the
Yeah.
same data set. You're telling
Yeah.
me to go to this site and waste an hour when this thing's going to give me the exact same result in like 5 minutes?
Yeah. We've made this tool better for you, and now you're not. No, this no.
Yeah, I mean, if I was in the education system, I'd be like, man, this is bullshit. I can't be bothered. Like, this is not the real world, guys. This is not training you for the real world. Like anywhere
Yeah.
you go, they will be using tools like this. Like Notion is a mainstay in every startup I've worked in. Basically, it's like very good tool for organization.
And also, if students want to cheat, and I really, I'm really of the belief that like if your student is cheating, it's because they're smart enough to know how to
Yeah,
like game the system, and that's
which is a good
that's
skill.
that's that's a level of fucking intelligence. And like, so what? You've blocked it on the school servers. You think they can't go home and use their laptop? You think they're not like? I've seen quite a few students who kind of disengage in the lesson, or at least
Yeah,
try to disengage in the lesson, and then they come in the next day and they go, "Oh, yeah, I did it at home," and then I have
yeah,
to like now I have to actively go in and be like, okay, well, let's how. Whereas in the classroom, I can oversee, like I literally in my classroom, every screen faces me. I can see what all of my students are doing during
yeah.
lesson.
I
So
mean, I
I
mean,
could be getting them to like do this properly. It's just crazy.
no, I would definitely cheat. Like, I would definitely be one of the cheaters. I try to cut as many shortcuts as I could. Like, if
The
I
thing
had
is, like,
AI,
you
it'd be
can't. The
great.
thing is, you can't even really cheat, especially. Well, so I mean, I teach game design, and like, ChatGPT is great. But yeah, like I mean, it could help you get around the research stuff, like write up like your research stuff. But when
Yeah,
it comes to actually designing a game and like developing your idea and stuff, it doesn't quite get there. And I mean, obviously, there's a point at which it might very
yeah,
well be able to do that. But definitely right now, it would be so much better if I could sit down with a student who's like, especially students who struggle, because there are students who are like, they're not the ideas guy. You can give them a
mm,
task and they can complete a task, but they're not an ideas person. And you could teach them how to formulate ideas
yeah,
literally using like
yeah.
AI tools.
It's
Like
very
this is where
easy.
you start, this is the path you go down. And even if like ChatGPT is spitting out answers for you, it's spitting out answers to questions you've asked for a design and a plan that you have.
Yeah,
So it's
no,
it's no
absolutely.
different to any other tool. I just think it's madness.
No, I mean, I think that's a broader just discussion on education and how shit education is here, which I
Yeah,
totally agree
as a
with.
as a teacher, I think we were bound to
I mean, I think a
end
lot
up
of
going
it's
that
just
way.
that these systems are a little bit archaic, right? In terms of how they've been set
Yeah,
up and how, like if you're talking, and this goes to point of progression, it's the slowest here, right? Like
yeah,
you're teaching people to be like, yeah, let's not use what you're going to use in the real world every day, right? That was my biggest problem when I was at university, was that it just did not feel applicable to actual society and what I was going to do. And I've never used economic theorems or like mathematical
hmm
principles in half the shit I've done. So I'm just like, my degree, actual study time feels kind of like a waste. It's the network that was good. That's what you go to uni for.
yeah.
Education is so outdated here. Like it's
There,
just,
even now, like to do a college or university course. I don't know if universities do it so much, but definitely in the colleges, you are forced to continue doing your English and maths in order to complete your course, which like
yeah,
which yeah, if some of my guys it's game design and they still have to do English and maths. When realistically,
wow,
what you need, what every kid needs, is an understanding of how numbers work in their life. They don't
yeah,
need like the full-on extent of maths. They don't need to like all of the things that they force you to learn in maths. You don't need all of that. You need functioning life stuff like how are you gonna like deal with your money?
yeah, yeah. The
And with
basics.
English, like if you can speak it and you can write it, like why do you need to be able to like write novels? Like why do you that's
Yeah.
not everyone's life. You can't just make everyone,
No, I mean,
I
I
don't know.
agree. I mean, for
It's
me,
tough.
like, I've always struggled with grammar, spelling, punctuation, and I'm just like, I'll write a massive block of text, I'll get ChatGPT or Claude to just edit it for me for grammar and all that shit. And I'm like, it's very
Even
good at that. It's very good at that. Grammarly's
yeah,
very good at
even
that.
if you just use Google Docs, like it corrects enough for free. Like you don't, and then there's like Grammarly that the basic Grammarly gets you most of the way there. Like
Yeah.
yeah, you can pay for like, oh, this would be a really cool way to say it. I don't care about the cool way to say it. I've said it my way. Is it grammatically like correct?
Yeah. Yeah. There we go. Nice and simple. I think we're getting off topic on education, but like, yeah, I think it is.
Let's see if we can bring it back.
It is definitely a big factor in going to the whole slowness of adoption and stuff. If like in university you're basically being told don't use AI, and then you come
Mm,
into the real world, are you going to be inclined to use AI straight away? No, you're good. You don't know how to use it yet. It's a new skill to learn. So
yeah.
just going to that. That's why I'm saying there's slowness in adoption. It's like pretty much at all fronts, at all levels in
I think
society
it's
here.
weird
So
because like the access to these tools is like couldn't be easier, right? Like it
yeah,
used to be that when new things were made, you had to wait until version 4 when you could afford it, whereas now we tend to get basic versions of stuff really easily, and then as they progress, making it more powerful, they put stuff behind like a paid tier wall, but you still have enough access to it that yeah, if you were to move into a space where it's going to be super useful to you, um, then but we still have. I think a lot of this like anti AI stuff literally just comes from the art theft side of things, right? Like everyone's still
mm,
running the fear mongering of, well, it's
uh,
just stealing our
yeah.
work, and over here, for some reason, with that stuff, we have a long memory,
I mean, it's a
and no,
negative.
yeah, no one's going. Well, I don't know. I think I'm in two minds about it. Like either that's what's happening vocally, but privately everyone's using ChatGPT, or
Yeah.
like there is this real like anti-AI thread, especially within the UK, and we're having a hard time shifting it.
I mean, I think it's a mixed thing. I think it's a mixed thing. I think there is like it's easier to be part of the vocal minority, right? Like if somebody's shouting about something, like I think most people don't care. Like that's the being on the internet. That's one thing that you just don't understand is most people don't give a shit, right?
Yeah,
They're not going to be spending energy to shout around. The people that want to shout around are always going to shout around. The internet just gives them another platform to do that, and that's what we see a lot of times is like the negativity. Because like I mean, British society in general, let's face it, we like to complain. That's just like kind of the MO for the stereotypical British person.
yeah,
Is
we
like,
should never have been allowed online.
exactly, you like to complain, right? You're literally in a society of complainers. Of course, you're going to complain about random stuff. I don't
Yeah.
think half the people actually care nearly as much as they try and put in online. It's more just like
Yeah.
we're trying to get an argument going because we're British. That's what I see that as more than anything else. And I think everyone's still going to use ChatGPT or not use it, but like ethical boundaries, I think very few people have ethical boundaries that are fully stated against AI. As
Hmm.
much as you like to shout about it, it's like, oh yeah, I read that. Okay, makes sense. Oh yeah, this is an inflammatory topic. Ooh, I can gossip with my friends about it and complain. I don't think it goes beyond that.
Yeah.
but but yeah, I guess getting back onto the game side of specific things, we've kind of covered AI and we've had layoffs. I
Hmm.
think overall, yeah, like cautiously optimistic is what I would say is the overview of the industry. But and I think on the indie side, there's still a lot of opportunity. I think when we're looking at growth, if like new trends, new innovations, new mechanics, games are going to become much more easier to make than ever before.
Which is
Costs,
crazy to think, considering how easy it's become, even over like the last
yeah,
what 10 years.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I think like we went on to this with the generative AI thing, but I do think that eventually someone's going to crack that with, the growing models where you can just use AI to develop a game and code the game design and have that kind of spit you out a basic running model. Like that I see as a very, very sort of realistic future. And
Mm.
already if we're looking at games, like the biggest games in terms of concurrent user base, in terms of people playing, are built on Roblox or like
Yeah.
one of these like Roblox, Minecraft, Warcraft. But like Roblox, I think some of their mini games have something like more than 1.5, 2 million concurrent user bases, which is bigger than any game on Steam, right? And
Yeah.
this is being made by like 10, 15-year-old kids or even adults at this point because there's so many Roblox studios out there. But you're seeing on these UGC platforms games that are bigger than anything on Steam in terms of the user base that they can attract. So just from that alone, those are mostly not traditional game devs. Those are not developing your big like indie AAA, AA, whatever, but they're building on this platform,
Yeah.
and it's still a game. So just by that, the way you're going to build games, the way you're going to see games come out, like I think we've both looked at some award show stuff, and it's like there's a lot of innovation happening around there, and I think indie still is where a lot of the growth is going to come from. Like I was reading an article about like the top 10 kind of games this year. I mean, the mainstays, you had things like Black Myth, you had Helldivers Palworld as like the top three, I think, on PC. And then on the flip side, you have other sort of indies coming out, like Balatros come out really big after Game Awards as well. Like that's been really good. You had like Warhammer 40K, like all Path of Exile 2, like so many games that aren't the mainstream. Like this going to that double A fact to a point, but like not the traditional games that you would see being in the top 10 at the end of the year kind of thing. So I think indies definitely have a lot of space. At the same time, you're going to be entering a very, very saturated market, and it is going to be very, very cutthroat. Like there's opportunity, but I say on the flip side, there's only opportunity for a few people because people only have so much time.
Yeah. I think, I mean, a lot of the indies that I'm working with right now are all in like a similar situation. They're all like you said before, actually, they're all kind of like chugging along and like looking for where that funding might be. I actually don't, weirdly enough, I don't know anyone who is making stuff on Roblox. Oh, actually, I might know one person. I'm surprised I don't know more. But I
It's
think
not as big here.
yeah, but I think maybe it's just like the UK or slash London network where um, everyone kind of has access to the same knowledge pool and information, and so everyone is kind of functioning the same way, like a small team working on a small game in order to get funding, in order to make the bigger game. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, even to a certain extent, that's what I'm doing with my studio. Um, we're not trying to make next year's like massive hit. I mean, it would be nice if it turns out to be that, but you you know you plan for the worst, a hope for the best, right?
yeah, yeah. No, I think. I mean, I think there's always space. I think one thing that I would encourage everyone to do is just understand the global state of the games industry. Like that's always, I mean, come to me, I can do that for you too. But no, I think that's always like an important factor where you need to know what's happening, right? Because like we've discussed many times, the success of your game is not really just dependent on your neighbors or the people down the road that are playing. It is very much the global market and how your game is out there. And if like you're chasing a trend, you're not doing anything too original, like it's gonna be very hard to stand out, whether it's
Hmm.
Steam or whichever other platform. Like you're oversaturated. Discoverability is gonna be tough. So with a lot of that, that's just gonna continue. And I don't know if it's just a UK thing or whatever. I think with Roblox and things like that, it is a younger audience generally, right? So you're looking
Yeah.
at the majority of people are between the age of like 10 and 18 who play that. And then you
Which is
transition out.
why that platform's in a lot of hot water at the moment, right? Because there's lots
Yes
of
and
kids
no.
there
No,
and
I mean I think that's honestly like that was just one report that was done inflammatory by like a private equity fund that was trying to make
but
money.
there's now the gambling stuff, right?
I don't think it's as big as that. Like
Oh,
we'll
right,
we'll
okay.
see how they deal with it, but I think their responses so far have been pretty strong. And
Yeah.
like whichever platform it is, you're gonna have outliers, you're gonna have stuff happening.
Yeah, you're
But
gonna have
by and large,
dark
like
people trying to do dark shit.
exactly, like that's
Yeah.
gonna exist on any platform, right? Like I don't see that as necessarily a killer for them. Like they're still doing, you know, growth wise better
Yeah.
than ever, right?
Yeah.
More people are on their platform than ever before, despite all of this. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of it's like, you know, when you get too big, you get become a target, and it's partially
Mm,
that.
yeah.
And we'll see how they deal with it, but I don't see it being a big enough thing right now to like kill them or anything like that.
Oh, yeah,
Like
no, yeah.
yeah, I feel it's more fear mongering and just generally people trying to make a quick buck here and there. Like media loves negativity because like that's what sells at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like whenever you're reading a negative piece of media, you're reading it because that's what's selling.
Right.
Nobody
Right.
wants to be like, oh, Roblox is so much fun. It's great and like ethical and good for people. Who's gonna want to read that? Nobody.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you
Small
go for
small
what you
corners of
got.
the internet where people praise things.
Exactly. That's definitely
Yeah.
not in my feed. But yeah, so I don't see that as a killer, and I do think it's like a younger audience. It's like it's a different thing. You've got brands coming in, you do have different studios being built on that, but by and large, most people that are using that, building on that, are in their teens. And I think that's good because a lot of times, a lot of these people are now used to game design, used to building things, and then they can transition into the mainstream games, sort of media and industry in
Yeah.
general, where you're coming from a basis of people that have already built games and designed things from when they were kids, rather than where basically you come in, maybe have that one random game design course in uni and have never experienced anything like it, and like get thrown
Yeah.
into the deep end, make your quick like Unity game, and you're done, and you're just like, oh, I kind of made a game. I kind of made this coding thing or something random with a basic sprite package. I don't know. So it's just like I think that part is changing, and I think we're gonna get more technically apt people who have a bit more freedom because they haven't had the structured sort of teaching. Because I think that there's a lot to be said about structured teaching in game design and all this, but I think structure by and large does not always mesh with creativity, right? Like that's always a big thing. So if you've got people just randomly creating random shit on Roblox to start with, I think that's a very good core fundamental like design skill to innovate and try different mechanics and different styles of play compared to what traditionally works. Because in the like we said, the last couple of years everything's been a roguelike, right? Even now we're
Yeah.
still roguelike or souls like all this. And everybody who's coming out of uni right now or this is like, we want to build a roguelike or a souls like because that's what's going to make us money. Whereas that's not even an MO for kids, right? They don't
Yeah.
understand yet the broader trends. They're just like, we just want to build a fun game. And I think
Yeah.
you lose some of that when you get into the structured side of teaching, into fundraising, all of this. Is the we want to make a fun game part often gets threatened.
Hmm.
So I think for me, I'm excited about the next gen of devs because I think they are coming from a basis of we want to make a fun game, and then on top of that, you're going to add structure, which means
Yeah.
that I feel like they'll have better ideas for what to build. Whereas what we have right now is more you have no real involvement in games, you just played them, so you've been following trends throughout your life. And then you get the structured teaching of this is how you look at games, this is how you get funding, this is how you should pitch everything as a Souls-like or AI enabled or like roguelike or whatever, right? And then so I'm like cautiously optimistic by the fact that these people have been building games since they're kids, that they can actually build cool shit that's going to be different to what people imagine. So that's where I'm like, hopefully we get better trends there. But yeah, by and large, I think indie's going to become very competitive as well because of a lot of the mass. Like you have, like I said before, what like 17-20% of Riot got laid off. All those people are game hardcore people. They're going to make cool
Yeah.
games, and they're going to make indie
Well,
games.
they're all gonna try.
They're going to
This
try.
this is the thing with the mass layoffs. Like, it's a shit ton of really skilled, talented people. It's a shit ton of people who are jaded by like having a
Hmm.
career in what was supposed to be a stable career in games. Um, I've spoke to so many people who, and I think I've mentioned this before, but so many people who like got laid off, got a new job 2 weeks later, and then 2 weeks later were laid off again.
Yeah.
Like, and those people were laid off. Like some of them, I think, especially a large contingent of Riot. Like, and hats off to Riot for like giving really good severance pay to a lot of people that they laid off. But yeah, they've been laid off. They've got some time. They've got some money. They've got some space to
Hmm.
breathe.
Hmm.
And a lot of them are going, well, I'm gonna make that game that I've had an idea for.
Yeah.
And I think that this does mean like whereas before there was like a wave of indie studios, and um, in the wake of that is like the bloodbath of the nine 9 out of 10 studios fail, and I think with this influx of new indies, this bigger wave, it has the potential to be a bigger bloodbath. But I'm hoping that there's enough of us out here like trying to provide support and knowledge and information to maybe make sure that it's not such a huge bloodbath, and to see if we can get there to be a lot more success in the space.
I hope so, but I kind of doubt it. I
It's hard.
think
It's hard.
I think just it's just numbers. It's a numbers game, right? Like at the end of the day, all these people are laid off right now, right? You're
Hmm.
gonna get a lot new indie studios. Games is also interest wise from like education. One of the it's become bigger, right? Like it's become more mainstream. More people want to do it. More people want careers in games. Now these students are coming out into this industry. They don't know what to do because no one's hiring. So they're going to build their own games. A
Yep.
lot of the seniors have been laid off and they're just clumping. Like this is, I think, one of the negative things about the games industry. It is still a very gate kept industry, and it is very just like who you know in closed door meetings and all that stuff. Like despite wherever you are, that's just what it is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what we have there is you're going to get more competition on all these people building stuff, but and the user base is growing. The good thing is the user base is growing, but on the flip of that, it's growing internationally. So again, if we're just looking at UK alone, it's like everyone's thinking like this, guys, and
Yeah.
everyone's moving as fast. And the flip side of that is specifically is just that like you people don't have infinite time, right? Like
No.
we're in the real world again. We're going out again. Games is big, yes. People play games, yes. But if you're looking at numbers, people play the games they're used to, right? The biggest games by playtime, by numbers, is still your Roblox, Fortnite, all of that. I think I
Hmm.
mentioned this before, but something like overall, like new games, the playtime is something like 8-10% of total user playtime goes to new games.
Yeah.
That's small, right? And you can grow that. You can grow that over time if you're a live service game, which is I just wouldn't. I would not encourage anybody to build a live service game, but like if you want to, you can find that one moonshot that will succeed in a sea of dead millions.
Yeah.
But for most people, they're not going to be building that. And they're not going to have funds to build that. They're going to be building more the stable things. And for that, you have a very small proportion of the global playtime going to these games. That's also taken up by your IPs and reoccurring like remake. I mean, this is one of the reasons remakes and things are still going strong.
Hmm.
Going back to transmedia as well, I think that trend I still see continuing to a degree, where people
Yeah.
are still just going to be rehashing old franchises. I mean, you got your story, you got your baseline code, you got a lot of different things that make it so much easier just to iterate on, right? So this is like nostalgia bait, and it
Hmm.
works largely. Like it's mixed because if we're looking at it, like Rebirth did not do as well Final Fantasy 7 wise as remake. Part of that's more maybe because it's the middle game. On the flip side, you had things like the Genshin games. Like Genshin was big, Honkai Star Rail was big. ZZZ didn't even crack the top 10.
Right.
So, you know, they're in this reoccurring thing of they've essentially cannibalized their own audience with their games to the point that they're
Yeah.
not actually growing. They are all their games are their existing audience. So instead of growing Genshin audience has now gone to Honkai and ZZ. And basically across the board, their audience isn't growing, they're just shifting between the games. So you're getting things like cross cannibalization, you're getting all this stuff where it's becoming harder to grow audiences for new games or get them even for existing studios for games that should be good.
Do you think that that means that there's going to be like a stagnation in like you want us to move away from roguelikes, but but there's like a whole bunch of people out there playing these games and like
Yeah,
how I mean also I mean I think you and I've been talking about this a lot like the like and it ties into Fortnite and stuff like the you're not just competing against other games, it's the attention space like
yeah,
people there are people who spend their evenings watching Netflix and maybe play like a mobile game.
yeah, yeah.
um, and then there are people who, yeah, play Fortnite all night long with their friends. Like, how do we pull people away from the things that they love without it just being more of the same?
Well, I think there's 2 points there. One is on the game side. The thing like because games are becoming easier to make, the thing that's gonna and this is not just games, this is any product that for what I see in the future with things like AI and all these tools making things easier to make.
Hmm.
What's gonna make you stand out? Like you can have a roguelike. You can have like I think Balatro proved this. You had Cult of the Lamb. You have so many like examples. These are like the 3 4 games that succeed, while the million others in the same genre don't. And a lot of
Yeah.
that comes down to sort of the little things, right? It's the design. It's like the very little ways that you interact with the systems. Like they all have a very unique spin. It's not just a roguelike, right? If you're
Hmm.
building a roguelike, it's like you're building a roguelike with like 20% of RPG or 30% of this or that kind of genre mixed in to make it unique. The core
Right.
fundamentals function like a roguelike, but it's not a traditional roguelike because that market's dead, right? Then you're
Yeah.
building another Hades. If you're building a Hades knockoff, why is anyone going to play your game, right? Whereas if you're building something with similar mechanic schemes, but like for a completely different genre or space of games or a completely different audience, that makes sense. And I think that's what it goes to is like, and this is what I think the last episode we discussed a lot with me and Kay about payload was you really need to understand your why. You need to understand the culture of like what you're building, who you're building for, and why you're building it, and how
Hmm.
that informs your broader vision and team kind of structure. So if you've got a strong vision, you know what the audience you're building for is, and you have like I don't see anything else quite like this. Like I can see that my players may come from all these different subsets, but this is like a niche within this space that is popular, but I can kind of very clearly define what it is. Then I think you have a good business case to make a game there. So if you can make a roguelike
Right.
with that very niche space, you can probably still succeed. Like I'm not going to say you can't. I think what we fall into the trap of is people just look at the broad thing of like roguelike succeeds, I'm going to build a Hades spin-off.
Right. Right. Right.
And that's the thing that I don't want to see is like you're going down the lane of I've spent 3 years working on this game, which is like Hades, but then you get an extra sword. Or like Hades, but then you get this one extra mechanic. It needs to
Hades,
be
but with guns.
exactly. It needs to be like actually unique. It can't
Yeah.
just be like basically 99% the same game and we have 1% of design change. No, it needs
Yeah.
to be like more like 50-50, like the core fundamentals of what makes it a roguelike, sure, but with a completely new spin on it. And I
Hmm.
think that's where you're going to see the games that succeed are going to be the ones that leverage either you go into a new genre and that's a risk in itself because you don't know if that's going to hit, but you have a strong vision for it. Because I mean, like roguelike wise, like nobody thought Hades was going to be as big as it was. That was them
Yeah.
going into essentially a place that was dormant. So similarly, you can
Do you,
go
but do you
into
think the key thing with Hades, and this is it's what I feel like it might be, it's um, the hunger for the IP, like the way that the world and the characters were versus like it just being a roguelike.
I think it's a mix. I don't think the IP alone is the thing. I think it's understandable, right? Like the IP makes it understandable, the mythology basis. There was a trend at that point of other mythology based kind of games. You had, I don't remember, there was a Wii game as well. Uh, can't
There was a
remember it,
few,
but
yeah, like
yeah, so you had a lot of mythology based kind of games. And I think
yeah,
that's like, if you just look at any company, usually like mythology based stuff is always popular, whether it's company names, whether it's games, whatever, because it gives you like a rich source to draw from. And then you
yeah,
can flip that into something else. So I think the familiarity and the mythology thing kind of gives it that kind of epic, like more understandable thing. Like if you just look at Supergiant Games' other games, right? Like Bastion, Transistor, that kind of thing, like they had less of that connection. So this was definitely the most mainstream one because of that IP-ish connection. But at the same time, it was just a really good game, right? Like you can draw attention to it through things like that and through marketing. That's just marketing. That's go to market. That's marketing. How you're showing the flash. The
yeah,
rest of it is all literally like, does the gameplay stack up? And I think that's what you saw is like, it was after it got released and it got rave reviews that it grew and exploded, and all the influencers picked it up because it was like the it thing to play.
yeah,
So that's just how media trends work, right? Like you've got to obviously have something on the marketing side to position, and that's like another side of the coin. But ultimately, you do need to make a fun game. You need to make a good game that people want to spend time with. Like, if your game has cool marketing, you'll sell a lot. But if it's a shit game, people are going to drop off,
yeah,
right? Like even now we
yeah.
have, I think, like Chained Together, which is another Underworld game. That's
Hmm.
super big because of the social media sphere, and that's definitely like that's an indie game, right? Like kind of. So like that's huge.
Yeah.
So it's things like that where it's
It's also
like,
not very complex.
no, it's not. It's not. It's just
Yeah.
doing a fun thing with co-op, and you can see this with co-op here with like Helldivers 2 becoming really big with co-op and all this stuff. And you've had that trend with a lot of like, especially when you see influencers, you had the competitive things with things like Among Us. Now we're going more towards cooperative play and co-op, because that's like, again, it's you had, I think COVID time was very big with Among Us. All these, you had everyone trying to make like a competitive co-op game. All your shooters, all your that. Now somebody came along, they're like, flip side, there's so many co-op games that are really popular. Let's do something else. What's different? Instead of competitive, we're making it cooperative. That was the innovation. That was the
Mm,
change, right? And those games are doing really well right now, because that's like, oh, I've played a dozen comp co-op games. There's like 3 co-op games. So let's
right,
play
right.
those now. And now like influencers pick that up because it's something different for their audience to see. You see them interact in different ways. It's good. That's why Helldivers, Chained Together, all these games work. Where it's like similar genre space, similar mechanics, they've just taken a different view of it in terms of making it cooperative play rather than competitive. And that's the innovation there. And that is still an innovation in terms of what games are producing, because most people were making just competitive
Yeah.
game. So it's little things like that where you can look at the trends, absolutely. You've just got to find your own spin on it and make sure that it's unique enough. And even then, your chances of success are not the best, but they're better. And that's
So
basically what it
let
is.
me hit you with like a broad question here.
Yeah.
What do you think? What are Jay's uh predictions for trends in 2025?
Ooh.
Is there anything like sneaking up on us that no one's paying attention to, do you think?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. There was a time I had more data to look into this compared to now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, I don't know, next year's going to be a weird one. I think AI is going to continue. AI is going to
Right.
be huge. Generative AI is slowly sneaking up on us. I don't know if I'm convinced yet that games can be designed completely with AI input, but I think that's going to be a big trend going forward. Next year is also going to be a really tough year for general games because of GTA. Right, next year is a AAA coming back in strong form thing.
Do you think
So
we're actually going to see it?
you're
That-
gonna see you're gonna see a shit ton of money go into PC console games, especially console next year,
right.
because there's a lot of big franchise games
But do you
coming
think we're
out.
actually going to see GTA? Like that, it's been on the hook, right? For
I think maybe, yeah, next Christmas. If it's like right now, it's projected either like last quarter of next year or beginning of 20 like
okay. So
six.
so so everyone has a little window of opportunity
If you have a
to either
game ready right now, go publish it by March, April, and you should be good.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I mean that's partially why you have Assassin's Creed Shadows, sorry, coming out now. I think February or March. They took that window for
Right,
early
right,
year.
right.
You've got the new Ghost of Tsushima game, I think, coming out next year as well. Another like big PlayStation exclusive. Again, a big franchise that's super popular. They, went onto PC and they ended up in like the top 10 charts now. A lot of the PlayStation exclusives are actually going onto Steam and they're performing really well. So this is a huge trend and a huge win for Sony and PlayStation, is that they're putting their sort of exclusives onto Steam, and those games end up in like the top 10 in terms of revenue and performance because everyone wants to play them. There's a lot of excitement for getting exclusives coming to PC because it's like, oh, it's finally like we're finally getting to play this as like PC players. So that's still a thing that's growing for them, and I think there's a lot of franchises coming back next year with AAA side and especially GTA that money is going to be bigger. That doesn't mean that the number of games succeeding is going to be bigger. I think that's actually going to decrease. I think for me, big trends wise, I think, yeah, AAA is coming back, especially with GTA kind of leading the charge, but also all these other games that have been sort of delayed to that point. The second big thing that I'm looking out for is international markets. So you've seen, this is going kind of to mobile. One is, if you're looking at top game charts for PC console, they don't change hugely in terms of playtime. Like, it's still the incumbents that largely get most of the player share, most of the money. You have like the couple games that make it here and there. Mobile actually shifts a bit more. And having spoken to a lot of people in the mobile space, like, and being very linked with people in Korea, with people in China, a lot of them are now, like, I think Black Myth kind of showcased that China can build a AAA game and it can succeed globally and make a shit ton of money. So before, within the mentality of China, there was this thing of like, if you were building a big game, like a AAA game, people would just be like, nah, why are you doing that? Like, we know Chinese AAA games do not succeed. That was the mentality, right? So even for game science, and this is a team of like 5-6 people, I think, that built Wukong, the odds were kind of stacked against them. They had obviously popularity from the trailers and all of that, but like, the traditional people there, like, this is like anyone here being like, this kind of game doesn't work, right? That was the mentality in China, that AAA games don't work. Let's stick with mobile. That's the moneymaker. That's what you should do.
Yeah.
Now that mentality has changed because of how big Black Myth became. So now you have more studios there looking at going abroad. You also have a lot of mobile going to crossplay. Because what I'm seeing is a lot of the Asian market, like the games market everywhere, has kind of not grown as much as people wanted it to. And a lot of the Asian markets, like, okay, our local market's semi-shrinking, or it's not growing at the same rate as it once was. Like, people there still pay a shit ton more in games than anywhere else in the world. But, they're also starting to release now abroad. It's like, I don't know if you know Stellar Blade, but that was built by a Korean mobile. So that was a Korean studio. Their background is in mobile games. Their first game, their second game, so their first game was a mobile game that did really well in Korea. And sort of those markets. Their second game was Stellar Blade, which is a global hit. I think it's in like the top 15 of PlayStation's overall this year. So that became like a PlayStation exclusive, I think, Stellar Blade, and that did really well. So you're seeing a lot of mobile devs shift to PC console. And this is where we're seeing a lot of the big wins, is that mobile people, initially driven by things like Genshin, mobile people that are transitioning to PC, like, that's where people are winning because PC is growing as a market. Like, mobile is still growing, but not to the same rate as it was. So a lot of these devs are now looking for new markets. And flip side of that is 996, which is the, if anyone knows, that's how the Chinese work. It's like I think it's like 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. That's the work mentality. So if you're talking about crunch here, those guys crunch as part of their culture, right? So they're now building games for the West. They're now building AAA games. They're now building mobile games. And they can work those hours because that is how they work. So I'm at a point where you can get a lot more games coming out. And especially if it's live service, they can iterate them much faster. Because they basically get no sleep. They just work 24/7. And that's like the bigger trend that I'm kind of concerned of seeing, is like, how is the international market going to react if you get more games coming out of these spaces? I mean, Black Myth, again, going back to the mythology point, that's a mythology game, right? Like, that was what it was based on. It was a Souls-like-ish, but not really, adventure game that's also mythology based on rich, like, Chinese mythology. So you have a lot of those connections with the Asian players and all of this, and that's a huge market, right? And even abroad, that's a huge market. So the fact that, I mean, a lot of that game's success came from China, but a lot of it also came from outside. It's like very much a mainstream game. So seeing that alone, I'm like, I feel mobile is going to be, it's already very China dominated. It's going to be even more China dominated. Uh, PC AAA, China, Korea, I think if we're looking investment wise, like the biggest mover this year for me has been Crofton. Like they're buying up IP like Embracer did, except for they're getting it at much better prices and they have a shit ton more cash right now.
Right.
So Crofton is going big. That's why I was talking about the Gamescom thing, where I'm like, and then again Saudi. A lot of Saudi is just putting shit tons of money into games, esports, all of that. So a lot of
Hmm.
these like more eastern side things have money, and if you want funds, I would not look at anybody in the UK. I'd look at like Crofton. I'd look at Saudi investments, whatever. Like if you actually need funds, that's where the money is. Unfortunately, like those are
Do
the
you
ones
reckon
that
it's
will still give it.
possible for UK um, studios to access money from abroad, like funding
hundred
from
percent,
abroad?
100%,
Yeah.
100%. I mean, yeah, okay, just going by the past of it, most UK studios, a lot of them going to payload as well. Like we had 10-cent money, right? Like that's what it was. So
Right.
you can get those. It's just who you know, what you know, how you know it. And I think for the senior people in the industry, like if you're an ex-Riot person, go to Saudi venture fund or whichever. Be like, I'm literally ex-Riot. Give me money. They'll be like, here's a couple million. Go have fun. Because they
Wow.
have they have bank. They have mad bank. I think like right now, Crofton has something like 3 billion in the bank account that's sitting on. Like I think Play Ventures raised, I don't know, a fund of like 200 plus million or something that they're allowed to just spit out there onto games. Like there is big money out there. It's just not with European funds.
Right. Yeah. I've not in the UK. I've not seen a lot of financial movement. I've not seen a lot of. I mean, even UK publishers aren't seemingly being, yeah, big spenders. They're
No, I
not.
mean they're
They're
dying out.
making very, very rigid, calculated. Like they're really digging their heels in. I mean, I guess it makes sense. You know, we just had the COVID blip, but um, I think maybe they're being well. I would say that they are being too cautious.
Well, I
Like,
mean
you're not.
that's
It's
the thing
gonna.
is they don't have money. That's the thing, right? They
Yeah.
just don't have money. Like the money
Yeah.
dried up. The money dried up. They lived in La La Land for the COVID blip, and then the money kind of dried up. And that goes to my statement of like we in general are a bit more safe and cautious and less bullish than a lot of the rest of the world. I mean, this is like if you watch something like even general entrepreneur stuff, right? Like if you're just watching, I don't know, like Dragon's Den here versus something like Shark Tank in the US. The
Yeah.
scope of those deals is very different in terms
Yeah.
of what gets said and what's thrown around and how people invest. That just goes to the mentality of like, if you just want to understand how investors think, go watch a couple of episodes of Shark Tank, go watch a couple of episodes of Dragon's Den, and then just compare in terms of money, in terms of quality of pitches, in terms of all of that stuff about how these people ask questions and how much money they're willing to throw at things.
Yeah.
Like that's a very good, I think, way just to see how the US money system and investment works versus the UK or Europe. Like you can see that contrast very clearly from watching like 10-20 minutes worth of just content on YouTube from these two different sites. Like it's a very different ball game in the money that's there. And I think that goes into the mentality where I see a lot of people here are very unambitious with what they ask for. Because you can't ask for that much here, but you should be asking for way more. Right?
Mm.
Like, and this is the thing, if you go abroad, like if you go, you're asking for like somebody here for 1 million. In the US, that same person would be asking people there for like 10 million, and they're
Yeah.
not going to get laughed out of the room. I think this is the biggest problem with the mentality here is like, if you're doing startups, if you're looking to raise money, you often get laughed out of the room for things that are actually not that much money. Like in the grand scale of like what you could achieve if your game succeeds or if your product succeeds, asking for 1 million for something that might have 10, 20, 30 million in return is not that much or even
The
more.
the ge- the general ecosystem in the UK for indies, like everyone's being told, like 300K, 500K, like is is like what you should be asking. Um,
Yeah, which I absolutely disagree with. Because if you
it-
go abroad and you ask for that, people are like, have you considered cost properly? Are you sure? Because like I just invested in this indie, I gave them like 10 million. You're asking me
yeah,
for 300K? Why?
and normally for like the same time frame, right? They're like
Yeah,
18 months. Yeah, big old whack of cash.
yeah. And this is what I'm
But
saying.
but
It's
do
a
you think?
different
I
nature.
don't know, like if if it's part of the expectation is that like um abroad they will happily take that money and bloat out a team and like have maybe more people than they need to make the thing, get the thing done, get it done faster, get it done.
Um,
Whereas in the UK, there seems to be more of a like,
okay.
I don't
Yes and
know.
no. Yes and
Yeah.
no. I think there's this thing of like you we were going back to our first point of agile teams moving quickly, right? The whole point of agile is you move quickly. Like you
Yeah.
have a small team that's specialized and you can move quickly, you can iterate. We are in one of the fastest like changing industries in the world. We're in a tech, games, media, entertainment. It's like a cross point of so many different things
Mm.
where and it's very consumer centric. People are fickle, right? Like how often can you pay attention to the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Like if you binge watch one show, you're going to watch the exact same genre next. No, it's going to be so hard to get people's attention span.
Mm.
Like games, unfortunately, is a service industry for the attention economy. Like that is what you're fighting over ultimately with games. You're fighting over attention.
Yeah.
I think the one plus side on games when it comes to entertainment is it's the best like value for your buck. Like you get 70 hours of play time for like a 30-40 pound game. That's more than what you're going to get going to Disneyland or watching films or whatever else in cinema. So
And
that's
a
like
lot
the
of
redeeming
them
factor.
build in replayability. So
Exactly. So
yeah.
that's like content wise, you've got huge content pools. But if I have invested in a 100-hour game, that means I'm not going to be playing too many other games at that same
Yeah.
time. Right? So it's like you're one that stands out kind of thing. But on that specifically, it's like we're literally fighting over the attention economy with games, and people have choices. That's what you've got to understand first. The second thing is if you're not moving fast, like if you were building Hades right now, like you started when Hades 1 came out, you decided roguelikes where it's at. I'm basically going to build Hades plus 1, right? And you waited 6 years because you're just developing in perpetuity because you don't want to move fast and test. And now you release Hades lookalike today, you're going to fail.
Yeah.
So just by going slowly, the trends change. People's opinions of things change, right? The general consensus MO in the world of how what to play, what's the big trends change. And they change faster than ever because our attention span is going to shit because of things like social media and TikTok. So it's
And
like,
also you have like the big game splashes or the big franchise splashes that will quickly flip it from like we're into Greek mythology to it's the season of the witch to it's like space marines everywhere. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, like we move very, very quickly now. The world moves very quickly. The sort of meta of how people interact with games and media moves very quickly. And a lot of that depends on understanding influences, understanding community, understanding audience. Those are, I think, the biggest factors for building a successful game now is partially design and uniqueness, but the other side is understanding what's happening out there in the rest of the world and how that MO is changing and going to impact you. I think those are the two biggest things I'd say you should just keep an eye on. Um, and so yeah, like if you're not moving fast, like I find it very hard to imagine how you're going to succeed in a global market.
Do you think that indies should be looking at how best to uh yeah, develop something like within a year? Is that where we should be at? Like
Yeah,
should we
yeah,
be aiming to
yeah,
be that fast?
definitely. That was faster even. I mean, like
Yeah.
you see a lot of games go out into things like early access, right? Early access has changed sort of the MO.
That's yeah.
People that come into early access know they're not expecting a complete game. Look at something like Valheim. Valheim was the cross section of like the first level basically, right? They definitely developed that I think in less than a year, most likely. But like it became huge, and then people were like, "Yeah, we want to see the full game," right?
Right.
And then you can go and get funding and all that stuff because you've got actual data, you've got people paying, you've got people registered, you've got people playing, you've got the zeitgeist basically. But it's things like that where it's like you build a cross section, you shove it out there, you make sure that it's in line with what people want, and you grow off that as quick as you can. Like having a game in development for 5-6 years, it doesn't work anymore because you don't have runway in terms of money, and you don't have people's attention or the zeitgeist with you at that point.
Yeah.
So it is getting to a point, and I think that's where being able to use AI tools, being able to work fast and build fast is a good thing, especially for indies, right? Like this isn't necessarily true for AA and AAA where you have long production cycles, all this, because they have money. They can
Mhm.
push shit tons of marketing, and even if you look at that, most of them do not release new IPs. They're releasing sequels, remakes, all of this, like big AAA stuff. It's mostly going down kind of the stale thing of like we're building off an existing IP, existing franchise. We're doing cross-play, we're doing transmedia, we're doing one of these things instead of like even like the new Indiana Jones game, which is like again a franchise game, right? So it's things like that where it's like dead media franchise now coming back in video game form, but it's an IP based thing. That's why that game got greenlit in the first place. It's not a random adventure game. So it's little things like that where you're seeing, I think the bigger players have money, runway, all that, but by and large, they're not the trendsetters. They're just kind of there with nostalgia more than anything else. The trendsetters
I just saw
are on the
recently,
inside.
actually, someone, I can't remember who it was, but I think they got like it's either 300,000 or 600,000 pound NatWest loan, backed by the IP, and
Mm?
it's not like their IP was massive and huge and well known, but it's like that shift is happening where
Yeah.
it might actually be easier for indies to get funding if they've got a solid IP that can be valued.
Oh, 100%. 100%. IP is king right now. IP has been king for the last couple of years. Like, IP is it.
But then, like, for me, like as someone who owns their own IP, that would put me in like somewhat of a panic to be like, okay, this needs to happen or I lose my IP. Like,
What do you mean?
well, so the loan is backed by the IP. So
Yeah.
if they
Ah.
fail, then the IP is the asset that they have
Yes.
to give up.
I mean, that is the
But
world
I
we're
mean, I
in.
guess like if you're able to be an IP machine, right? If you you
Yeah, I mean,
start
look, if
making your own
it
money.
comes down to your inherent IP value, that's not the only deal you can make. Like, for instance, like I mentioned, Crofton. Crofton loves IPs. Crofton is going very bullish on IP. If you have an IP right now, go message Crofton and be like, "Yo, I need money. We'll make some deal." They'll probably give you better terms, like 10-cent terms, which are usually nicer in terms of letting you have studio control. And they have a shit ton of money. So if you're looking, 300, 600K for them is like walk in the park. You could ask
But
for a couple of
would
million
you
and they'd
think
still
that
be
they would be
happy.
looking to buy your IP as opposed to?
No, they'd be doing the 10-cent thing. If they buy stake in your company, if you grow big, then they get bigger stake.
All right, okay.
So I think they want to get into that multimedia conglomerate thing. Like they want to become semi like a Tencent, where they have their hands in a lot of different pots. Where it's like, hey, here's a couple of million, here's a couple of million, here's a couple of million. Give me 10% right now with priority shares to buy more later if you guys succeed.
Okay.
But it wouldn't necessarily be like if you fail, they don't give a shit. Then it's like, okay, you're dead.
Right.
Whatever.
Right.
Like we're talking here, like I said, they've got an investment fund of something like 3 billion, right? They don't care about a million here or there.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Especially, I guess, for the ones that take off, it covers the
yeah, I
losses
mean, this
and
is
yeah,
this
yeah.
is basically how like we see investment, not like publishing, but how we see investment works is like you get a bucket of something like 10, 20 different games or products. You shove in some money into all of these. 90% you expect to die. But that one or two is supposed to become like the big unicorn that earns like 1 billion. And that's going to cover all the 1 millions that you spent on these 20, 30 studios
Hmm.
because you're earning 10x, 30x, whatever. It's usually with VCs, they want a 10x return. But yeah, so it's
Right.
like you're earning, if you put a million, you're getting 10 million. If you put in five studios, you've put like a million each. You're still net positive of 5 million at the end of the day.
Right.
So that's how a lot of this works is like they will take those risks, they will shove it into any team that they think is good and has an IP or has traction. If you can show that, you can get money very easily, not in the UK or Europe, but outside of it very easily. Well, not
Okay.
very easily, it's still hard, but like easier.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that's the kind of MO of understanding just how global things are working right now. But yeah, so it's not all doom and gloom. There is definitely money out there. There is definitely opportunity out there. I think if you're an indie, if you're first starting out, just ship something. If you're first like a uni student group, ship something as soon as possible. Ship your hackathon game, whatever. Just build reputation. Maybe if you can get a way to join one of these newly created studios from like ex Riot people or something, that's a very good place for new people to be just to learn from industry veterans. A bit of like the mindset, and a lot of these people have more of a global view on the industry because you kind of need to. At
Hmm.
the same time, I think for those older people, it's really good to hire younger people because they still have some of that naivety and that like I guess, clearer thinking. They aren't tunnel vision. I think what the problem with a lot of people from places like Riot, PlayStation, all this is you have a very specific way to work. You have a very
Hmm.
specific mentality in what's right and wrong, and everyone around you is an echo chamber. So
Yeah.
most of these people is going to be like the five, six people from Riot that are working together in a new game. It's really good to have fresh blood in that kind of system to question and be like, but why are we doing things like this, right? Because like what I'm seeing, because like those young people have a different view on how the industry works and where it's going to grow and grow. Like they have different views on trends on how they've grown up with games versus like the 30, 40, 50-year olds from Riot who have their mentality in games. And I
Yeah.
think the merging of that is the best way in my mind right now to build an indie studio. Because like obviously for this naive person, they're going to need some aspects of realism and realistic of how games should work and what it is. But on the flip side, the people on the senior side also need some of that, like the fresh hope and naivety that gets you to just build something crazy and new in the first place.
Yeah.
Like if you're looking at startups, like it's the dreaming, right? Like you stop dreaming at a point, especially if you're jaded. It's like this is what
Yeah.
works, this is how it works, this is how we got to do it. That's not how the world works, unfortunately. So you need a mix of that naivety, creativity side of being able to dream and still think big and have ambition, versus the tampering of the realism. And you need to put that together. I think is probably the best case for a good indie studio to build something.
Yeah. I think you're right. Quite frankly, I think you're right.
Yeah,
Um, I think we've hit quite a lot of cool points. Um,
yeah. It's been a very meandering sort of episode.
I mean, those tend to be the best, where we hit everything that we wanted to, and had a few little offshoots of at least they're interesting, or at least hopefully they're interesting.
Yeah.
Jay, why don't you tell people where they can find you online?
I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn at Jay Uppal, and I mean, I'm not actually super active on socials. I should get to more of that. I am going to start my own blog soon. That'll be on Medium. So just go to my LinkedIn. You'll find the resources there. I'll be in the link of the description. You can also find me on my own GDL series, Growing Pains, which
Yep.
is slightly more business centric, and I try to speak with global leaders on that, or get gossip from my old friends. So one of those things, and like we do dive into different markets, different like sides of games, game tech, and all that as well. So feel free to check those out. And then yeah, you can also find me with the GDL people with Stu as well. And we have another exciting project that we're working on.
Yeah, which may, depending on, well, yeah, on when this lands, people may already know what we're up to.
Yeah,
But yes, and obviously people can find me at GDL. This is like my whole thing. And if you want to find me online, I'm at Stuart Ville everywhere. Even just what you can just Google me. It's easy enough. I don't hide online. And yeah, so this has been your Game Dev Local podcast, and see you again next time. Bye bye.
yep. See you guys. Have a good one. Bye.